Hello everyone, this is Gene and I'm back with a new video. No camera today, it's Sunday, I'm tired. I don't feel like being on camera today, but I hope everyone's well. We're weathering the storm here in New York. We're okay. So I've been through worse, so I try to count my blessings and my heart goes out to those who are impacted by this weather. Because I know that while we're just getting heavy rains, there are people who are really, especially in like North Carolina or Florida or Puerto Rico and different places, right, where they really get hit hard by these storms. So my heart goes out to them. RJ is currently snoozing on my bed, which he typically does at this time in the morning. It's a little after 8 a.m. Sunday. So I wanted to cover this article briefly from, I think it's GameSpot. It talks about Tomb Raider writer Rihanna Pratchett on why GTA 5 disappointed her. And I just find her comments interesting, especially since I do have a bit of a history as a player with the GTA games. Now, the games have been around, probably the franchise has been around for about 20 some years at this point, right? It actually started out as this kind of like top down sort of game, but of course it really sort of took off and was sort of the uh, father of the sort of open world type thing that's really popular now, really common now, right? That was with GTA 3. So the ones that I played were GTA 3. I played Vice City, which is my favorite. I played San Andreas and a little bit of Liberty City Stories, right? So that was certainly, a long time ago. I have watched a playthrough of GTA 4, and I've watched a bit of playthroughs of Vice City Stories and of Liberty City Stories because I never actually finished Liberty City Stories. I kind of got bored with it. And I tried to watch a playthrough of GTA 5, but by God, I just couldn't get through it. I just found the game so boring. But that's my history with it, both as a player and sort of as a viewer. So I think that I have enough experience here in different ways to sort of opine on what Miss Pratchett says about why GTA having three male protagonists in GTA 5 was a disappointment to her. Now, I want to be clear. I'm not against the idea of having a female protag for the next GTA game. I'm not against that in and of itself. But it is going to present unique challenges because of how the GTA games as a series work. So I will get into that as I review this article, and I also read the Wired article, the full interview that they did with her. So there are just a few things that she says that sort of make me go, huh? But anyway, here's what it says, and I apologize for the. Let me try to make it a little bit bigger. Let's see if that's a little bit better. Yeah, that's better. Okay, so it says Tomb Raider writer Rihanna Pratchett on why GTA 5 made her really disappointed. I remember being really disappointed with GTA 5 that the three characters were all guys. Right, so you can see that this article was written a few days ago, right? It's about 4 days old, right? So it says here, veteran video game writer Rihanna Pratchett, who apparently is the daughter of Terry Pratchett, who I think did Discworld, right? Has shared her thoughts on where she would like to see video games go in the future. The Mirror's Edge and Tomb Raider, and by this it's the Tomb Raider reboot, so Rise of the Tomb Raider games like that. The Mirror's Edge and Tomb Raider writer said in particular, she'd like to see GTA style mature rated games featuring women in the lead roles. Speaking to Wired, Pratchett said that she was really disappointed with GTA 5 because all of its three main playable characters were men. She saw this as a missed opportunity. I am interested in what the developers tend to do, or developers that tend to do, I apologize. I am interested in what the developers that tend to do hypermasculine worlds would do with more female-led stuff. I remember being really disappointed with GTA 5 that the three characters were all guys. I know that at the Housers, Daniel and Sam Houser, co-founders of Rockstar Games and developers behind GTA, have talked about the GTA series being an exploration of masculinity, and I thought, well, masculinity is not just the domain of men, and femininity is not just the domain of women. It felt like it could have been more interesting to me to see a woman operating in that kind of world, because there were some great female characters in The Wire that kind of had to operate in a masculine criminal underworld. She said, calling out Netflix Orange is the New Black as another example, which I believe she mentions here in this article, right? This is the original Wired article. And it's pretty much what was quoted here, right? Characters in The Wire that had to operate in the masculine criminal underworld. Same with some of the women in stories in Orange is the New Black. I'd like to see those developers that excel at the hyper-masculine stuff to take a stab at female-led stories and look at things that would come out of that, the textures and nuances of all sorts of interesting stuff that we haven't seen before, because there haven't been a lot of M-rated first-person or third-person shooters with a female lead. I'd like to see more female characters in that context. So this is the actual article. This is sort of the summary. Well, see, here's the thing. You need to understand, Miss Pratchett. Number one, the GTA series is not a first-person or third-person shooter. It is not Overwatch. It is not Call of Duty. It's an action-adventure game that has weapon mechanics. Yes, there are certain weapons you can use in the third person or in the first person, but it is first and foremost an action-adventure game. It is not a shooter. So right there, you are talking about the wrong genre. It doesn't fall into that genre. Just because it features weapons doesn't mean that it's a shooter. Number one. Number two, if you were familiar with the GTA games, then you would be familiar with characters such as Oscar Kassen from GTA 3, who's a mission giver, right? Who is somebody that the main character Claude works for, who is the co-head of the local Yakuza unit in GTA 3, right? You meet her later on in the game. She runs the Yakuza in Staten Island, not Staten Island, right? Because Liberty City is heavily based on New York City. So Staten Island is Staten Island, right? She runs it with her brother Kenji, and she is depicted in game as sort of being really the brains behind the operation. So there's her. Vice City had the mission giver of Auntie Paulette, who actually uses, let's say, some voodoo magic, right? To get Tommy to do what she wants, which is to actually attack Cuban gangsters. You can actually work for the Cuban gang boss, and for her, she's the head of the Haitian gang, and more or less play them against each other at the same time, which is how I used to play it. And then, of course, there's, what is it, Elizabeth Torres. You can do a few missions for her in GTA 4, right? She's sort of like the local female drug queen pin, I guess you could say, in GTA 4. And then there's, of course, going back to 3, there's, I think her name is Maria, but basically you're sort of female uh, antagonist who you get to fight at the end of the game, the one who nearly killed Claude in the opening sequence, and the reason why he's sort of on this revenge quest. So there are already a lot of sort of, strong women, right, or these uh, women that you don't want to mess with. Let's put it that way, right? In the GTA games, right? So again, if you played the games, you would know this. I find it interesting that neither in this or in the article here does she ever actually mention any of the female characters that are in GTA, right? Just she never mentions them. So there's the first thing. Second thing is this, and again, like I said, I'm not against the idea of a female protag in a GTA game. or in any game. I think it's fine so long as it makes sense for the story and it makes sense for the game. Everything ultimately should be in service of the game and creating a fun, interactive, engaging gameplay experience that you want to come back to over and over again. Right? But here's the thing. Even if you have a female lead, there's still going to be challenges in having her in a GTA game because it doesn't stop being a hyper masculine world just because you have a female lead. They've tried this even in the movies, thinking that you'll draw in a female audience to watch action films if you put a female lead as your protag. It doesn't work. Certain things are simply more appealing to certain demographics than others. If you think that you're going to draw in more women to watch or to play GTA just because you have a female protag, that's not going to happen. Men are still going to be the dominant player base because generally speaking, men like these type of games and most women don't. I would be one of the few who actually does enjoy this type of game, right? But there's your first thing. You're not necessarily going to increase female playership uh, uh, all that much. Because again, people are people and they like what they like, right? So there's that. That's the first thing. Second, because of the fact that she would be a female lead in this hyper masculine world of criminals. Let's get that clear. There's no such thing as a good person in a GTA game. Excuse me for a moment. Excuse me. As I was saying, right? It doesn't stop being this hyper masculine world that the lead character would exist in. And realistically speaking, if you were to have a female protagonist of GTA, of the next GTA game, well, guess what? Again, you're dealing with people who are not good people, who are not heroic individuals, including the protagonists themselves. There is no such thing as a good person in GTA. Everybody's either homicidal, corrupt, a psychopath, a sociopath, or simply inept. But nobody is a good person. So that's the first thing, right? The second thing is that, especially since it would be a woman in this hyper masculine underworld, she would be subjected to a whole lot of sexism, right? The characters in GTA, generally speaking, are shown to treat women very poorly because it's a game where you play as the bad guy and everybody around you is a bad guy, right? It's not exactly known for respecting women, right, in game, because it's the criminal underworld. There's no respect for anything, right? There's no respect for women. There's no respect for the law. There's no respect for life. There's no honor among thieves, right? That's kind of the point of it, right? It's the whole, damn, it's fun to be a gangster, right? You're playing as the bad guy. So there's that. And then there's just the general structure of how most GTA games work, which is basically that you sort of play as this character who's either coming out of prison or coming from some other place to whatever city the game is going to take place in, right? So it's sort of a stranger in a strange land type of scenario, right? Which is why they start out with next to nothing at the beginning of the game. Plus, in a GTA game, in pretty much any GTA game, the protagonist character is really just a lackey. You're basically just an errand boy going from boss to boss, from mission giver to mission giver, and doing whatever they tell you. You don't exactly have agency, which is a big deal these days when it comes to uh, female characters, right? You're in the GTA games, at least the ones I'm familiar with, you're not really in control of your own destiny. The character just does as they're told, and they go from boss to boss to boss, working for the Italian mob, working for the Russian mob, working for the triads, or the yakuza. There's always going to be one Asian gang, always, right? And then working for the government, and those are sort of like your sort of like general mission giver type archetypes, right? And eventually betraying everybody. And usually the player character is working for someone unwillingly. Like, for example, in Vice City, the protagonist character, Tommy Vercetti, is working for the Italian mob, in particular Sonny Forelli, because he lost Sonny's drug money. And Sonny wants his drug money back, right? Or in San Andreas, when you play as CJ, right? He's working for, very unwillingly, he's working for the corrupt cops of the crash unit, in particular Officer Tenpenny, right? So you play as a character who really just gets bounced around and eventually betrays everyone that they work for, right? This is even the case in GTA 4, which is very much a revenge story, right? Nico comes to America and he betrays or gets betrayed by nearly everyone he knows, including his own cousin to a certain degree, because his cousin Roman has been lying to him about living the American dream. So again, I'm not against having a female lead for a GTA game, but these are some of the issues that are going to come up if you do that. And what I'm concerned about is that if they do that, then it'll be women like Miss Pratchett, unfortunately, who will criticize how the game treats the female character, how she's objectified, or how there's a lack of agency, because they don't seem to understand how the game works, how the game world works, how the role of the protagonist works in a GTA game, right? It's not about being respectful. That's the point, right? So again, not against it, but these are the issues you are going to run into. And I think she would be one of the first people to criticize it, although she's the one calling for it, because here's the thing. I think that if, say, she worked on this, GTA as a game would change fundamentally. And people who like GTA for what it is, right? It doesn't need to change fundamentally just because it has a female lead, right? But I think that she would be one of the ones to try to change it fundamentally so that it's more female friendly, which it doesn't need to be. GTA is GTA. GTA is what it is. And it doesn't need to, be changed or modified to have a female lead. You have to respect the fact that if it did have a female lead, these are the issues that you would run into. And in my opinion, there's nothing wrong with GTA 5 in and of itself having three male protags. I just found the game boring. Just as a viewer, I just found it boring. I just couldn't sit through it. But the idea of multiple playable characters for one game, that's been around since the beginning of gaming. That's nothing new, right? But again, that's just me. What's interesting, but I find interesting, on top of this, right, is because, right, so she says that she's not a fan of the term strong female character because it's not a term that's used for men, right? A male character isn't referred to necessarily as strong. And yeah, I agree with her there. I agree with her, right? But there's this part here. Let me see if it can come up. Right. So she says. The Wired interviewer says. So I think I have the headline for this piece now. Rihanna Pratchett wants to write the next Call of Duty, which would be a first-person shooter, right? And then she says, not exactly, maybe something in the Red Dead Redemption world. Again, make what type of game that you're talking about clear, because you're the one saying first person and third person shooters. Call of Duty is a shooter. Now you're saying that you want to do something in the Red Dead Redemption world. That is again an action adventure game with weapons mechanics, with gun mechanics. It's not the same as a shooter. Are you sure you know even what genre you want to work in? And then it talks about the character of Sadie Adler in Red Dead Redemption 2. Yeah, Sadie's interesting, but Sadie's also pretty much vengeance incarnate, right? Her husband gets killed, and she's and she's out for revenge, and very much an anti-hero type character. It's like if Scorpion were a woman in the Wild West, it'd probably be her. Again, these are games where you don't necessarily have a heroic individual. And maybe she will get her own DLC and her own adventure, but you can't force that, right? So here's something else that I noted. This is the original interview that I found interesting coming from her talking about this, right? So she talks about Mirror's Edge and how the lead character, I think her name was Faith, is shown with a gun, and but she doesn't actually use it, and there's this dissonance between the gameplay telling you one thing and the story telling you another. Okay, so she talks about the game she's written for. She's written for Heavenly Sword, Tomb Raider, Mirror's Edge, right? So it talks about this controversy about the opening sequences of Rise of the Tomb Raider and implied sexual assault. Now, I've never seen Rise of the Tomb Raider, never played it, so I don't know anything about this scene. Right, but it says here that Lara's fighting for her life, and there's these holes and tunnels, the bad guys are chasing her, and things go south. The illusions are ugly, and the Wired interviewer asked for her thoughts. So she says that it's a game, and things like death and stuff I had nothing to do with. Okay. And then she says that I found them a little traumatic myself. It's quite like you're almost a surrogate mother or father for this character. You're invested with the character so deeply. It's like, oh, my child is getting hurt or robbed. Okay, I can understand that. You do form an emotional connection with these characters. So she says that what became the controversy wasn't something that was designed to be controversial, and all of this other stuff. She says that she wasn't the biggest fan of the deaths because they're full on and the camera lingers a bit. So then it says like it's watching a snuff film. I think it's a little dramatic to say, but then again, I never saw the scene. But then it goes on to this. This dang thing will scroll. Okay, here we go. Go back up. Go back up. Okay. So she says here, and here's the thing that sort of surprises me, especially given the type of games she has talked about wanting to work on, right? I did suggest for Rise of the Tomb Raider that they could put in a gore filter so the camera might blur at a certain point. You blur out the gore and don't linger on death. And yeah, that didn't happen, but I think it would have been a nice option to have because, if you're invested in your character, that's not what you want to see happening. Okay, but here's the thing. Here's the thing about that. There are certain scenes that have to be graphic to get the point across visually. After all, we are talking about telling a story, and we're talking about telling a story with M-rated games, right? Uh, for example, GTA, all the games are M-rated. Red Dead Redemption, the games are M-rated. If there's ever a rating to sort of push the boundaries with, it's M. It's for mature audiences. So why would you want to put in a gore filter? That's like putting in a filter to tone down Quiet's near rape in Metal Gear Solid 5, right? It's meant to be disturbing. That's the point. You're not supposed to feel happy, right? Or enjoy that this is happening. You need that visual, to make the impact, to have the scene have that impact. If you try to tone it down, then the impact of what's happening in that scene is lost. Now, I'm not one, who likes gore for gore's sake, despite my love of Mortal Kombat. I'm actually not someone who likes gore for gore's sake. or violence for violence sake, but sometimes you have to get intense with it to sort of get across just the severity of what's happening. Like, it reminds me of how do I put it? There's this series of episodes, 2 or 3 episodes in Helsing, where Sarah's Victoria, the police girl, right, the blonde with the big blue eyes, not Integra, but the other one, the one with the giant cannons, right? Girls love cannons, but there's a point in the story toward the end where Sarah's gets into a battle with one of the bad guys, and this bad guy's ability is basically to read your mind and bring your past back up, right? Sort of more or less mental mind screw. Let's put it that way. Screw you over mentally. And if you've ever seen that series of episodes that I'm talking about in its entirety, it's hard to watch because you see that Saris was shot when she was a child, her parents were murdered, her mother's corpse was defiled, let's just put it that way. And all of these memories are used to more or less torture her and break her mentally so she won't fight back. And that's what happens. She just starts screaming and wailing because she's mentally broken. Then she gets attacked and she can't see. And the only thing that sort of gives her the will to fight is when the sort of, human hunter dude, I think it's Pip, that she's in love with, gives his life trying to protect her. That's what convinces her to finally become a true vampire and to fight back. His death and the fact that he died trying in vain to save her, right? But that whole episode, or episodes, I think it's two, is very, very hard to watch. But it's hard to watch because of the depravity that's being enacted on the character. It's not done to make you happy, right? You don't watch this going, "Oh my God, that's just wonderful." No, you watch this going, "Oh my," it's just horrifying. And the fact that you're horrified, and the fact that you get upset with the villain for doing this to the most heroic character in Helsing, the most like sincerely good person, again in a world of antiheroes. When Ceres finally fights back and wins, you cheer for her because you know now everything she's been through. If you tone down that scene, which has been done, to air it on like TV and whatnot in a censored form, it's still intense, but still you really just lose a lot of that impact if you don't see it as it was originally made, right? If you don't see it uncensored, sometimes you really need to see something just as it is, just raw, uncensored, uncut, to really get the impact of what's happening in that scene. And if you put a filter or if you censor it, you lose a lot of that, not just story impact, but emotional impact. And again, we're talking about a mature rated game, so I find it a bit interesting that she would want to put in a gore filter. I won't linger on death. If you can't handle the imagery of the game, then don't play the game, right? Right. So that's just the way I kind of view that one. But yeah, I think that's about it. Then it talks about a game like if she could make her own perfect game, what would she do? And what's interesting is that she says that she would make a survivor, a wilderness survival game, and I'm like, you do realize just how graphic and raw and violent nature can be, right? So I just find it very interesting. But again, right, the main point that I wanted to cover here were her comments about Grand Theft Auto having a male lead or having three male leads, and having a female lead in this hyper masculine world. And again, I'm not against the idea of a female lead in GTA 5. I just think that's going to run into a lot of issues. But I think that, like with any game, right? I think that the most important thing is to create a game and to create a character that works for that game and is interesting. Somebody people want to play over and over and over again. But at the same time, it's like nobody wants to play Tomb Raider and play as a dude, right? Nobody wants that. Nobody wants to play Metroid and play as a man, right? No one does. If you were to replace those characters with men, people would not want to play the games. Let's just keep that in mind, right? Certain things are designed in a certain way for certain reasons. And that should be respected. So, if GTA 6 has a male protag, I'm fine with it. If they have a female protag, I'm fine with it. The ethnicity of the protagonist doesn't matter to me. What matters to me is if the game is interesting to me. That's all I care about. But anyway, that's the video. Please let me know what you think, and I will see you on the next one. Have a good day and night wherever you are. Bye.